There's one thing about hypnoanalysis. You're bound to do good with it. You can't do bad with it. It's impossible for you to do bad with it, because the patient themselves will lead you to the answer. Last night, a beautiful little 16-year-old kid, the doctor came up to me and said, "Mr. Ellman, we can't find anything organically the matter with this 16-year-old girl, and here's this gorgeous-looking gal, 16, and," he says, "she vomits. She's got an unearthly appetite." He says, "It's just an inordinate appetite. But after every meal, she regurgitates everything she ever ate." And he says, "As a result, we're pretty worried about her because we can't find anything organic that makes her vomit. We can't find anything about her that would put this on an organic basis. We think it's a purely functional thing, but at the same time, but we don't know what this symptom represents. We're rather lost in the handling of her. So do you want to see what hypnoanalysis will reveal?" And so I took her back to the first time she ever vomited, thinking that would be the answer. Well, it seems that she built herself up to a great big letdown. This was the first prom she'd ever attended, and she was 14 years old, and a 17-year-old boy was taking her to her first prom. And they go to the prom, and it turns out that he can't dance. Now, that was a terrible letdown to a 14-year-old girl. And she has a simply miserable time. But she had built this up in her mind as a tremendous event. Now, afterwards, he takes her in for hamburgers with the rest of the school crowd, I guess. And she's in there having hamburgers, and by this time, it's been a perfectly nauseous day to her. It's been a very much of a letdown. And so hypnoanalysis reveals that after she'd had this hamburger, she just couldn't stomach that guy anymore. And so she cut loose with a vomit. Strictly and so I thought sure I was on the right track, because she said it was a nauseous day, and so I thought sure I was on the right track. So I take her to the second time she ever vomited to see if I could find a habit pattern. I forget what made her vomit the second time, but I was sure I was on the right track. All of a sudden, some similar thing on the second time, and the third time some similar thing, and I thought I had the real answer to it, and I thought, gee, Dave, you're a pretty clever guy. When all of a sudden this girl throws me for a loop, when I said to her, "Mary, how would you like to get rid of that vomit? How would you like to stop vomiting?" And she said, "Oh, no, I don't want to stop vomiting." Now remember what I'm just telling you how you can't go very far wrong in hypnoanalysis. And I said to her, "Well, Mary, why don't you want to lose that vomiting habit?" And she says, "Why, do you know if I didn't vomit, I'd get fat, and a girl doesn't want to get fat." Now remember, I had been on the wrong track. She was simply an adorable little kid. And I know the doctor's got a terrific bang out of watching the hypnoanalysis on this child, because she was just simply lovely. But when the doctors heard this, they realized, along with me, that the master had really hit so far out in left field. Here I thought it was the nauseous evening she spent with that first boyfriend, and then I thought it was the second nauseous evening that she spent with another boyfriend, and I thought by this time we had the habit pattern established. It wasn't that at all. This child had become so boy conscious that she did not want to be fat. And she says, "Before I learned to vomit, I was fat. Don't tell me that I should lose this vomit, because if I don't vomit again, I'll get fat like I used to be, and I don't want to be fat. I'd rather vomit." Now, of course, it took further work, but I just want you to see how in hypnoanalysis, the patient doesn't let you get very far off the beaten track. Why? Because the patient, with an awareness of 2,000% or more of normal, won't let you make a mistake very easily. You can make a mistake like I did, because I'm supposed to be an old hand at this hypnoanalysis. But I make mistakes, and yet every time I make a mistake, it seems like the thing that always puts me back on the right track is the fact that the awareness of the patient finally reveals itself in some such thing as, "No, I don't want to lose that vomit. Maybe my doctor says I shouldn't vomit, but that doesn't mean that I don't want to vomit." And immediately we get on the right track. You'll find this thing happening again and again and again. When you do hypnoanalysis, you'll say, "Well, I guess I'm probing in the right direction." And then all of a sudden you'll find that it's in another direction you should have probed, but usually the patient is the one who'll steer you to it. I have seen this happen so many times, gentlemen, that I want you to know that it happens. Usually I'm considered to be pretty successful with hypnoanalysis, and I think I am. Years of experience does give a person an ability to almost sense what is wrong before you start the hypnoanalysis. But many times I can miss, many times you will miss. Hypnoanalysis is not a panacea, but hypnoanalysis is a wonderful answer so many times when you just don't have any other answer. Nothing would stop that girl vomiting but hypnoanalysis. Psychoanalysis would take years to do it. By that time she could be dead. Friends, I was saying to you a while ago that while hypnoanalysis is a wonderful tool to work with, I don't want anybody to look upon it as a panacea. For example, today, Dr. Lombardi brought to class a man who needs help. I'm positive that eventually Dr. Lombardi will be able to give that patient help. But today I was unable to give him any help. Why? Because I couldn't get him to relax. You'll never be able to do hypnoanalysis if you don't get the true somnambulism beforehand. Now, you can start out with waking hypnosis and go from waking hypnosis to the trance state. And let me show you how that's done in hypnoanalysis. You've never been in the trance state, have you? Now, I'm talking to you. Have you ever been in the trance state? Has you? All right. Well, let's find somebody who hasn't. Have you ever been in the trance state? All right. Well, no, you don't have to come up. I can show it to you from there. Just raise your finger like this, will you, please? I want you to think with a count of 3. And when I count 3, you won't be able to bend that finger. And you'll find you just won't be able to bend it. It'll be so rigid it won't bend. Now watch. 1, make it rigid. 2, absolutely rigid. 3, so rigid you can't bend it no matter how hard you try. Now try to bend it, you'll find you can't bend it. It just won't bend. No. I want you to think you can't bend it. Don't think you can bend it. Think you can't bend it. Want this to happen, in other words. Don't want it not to happen, because if you want it not to happen, it'll never happen. Raise your finger. Now want it to happen. 1, 2, 3, and now you can't bend it. Try, you'll find it just won't bend. Try. The harder you try, the less it'll bend. Now watch this. As my finger bends, your finger will bend, but you'll find that your eyes will close and you will not be able to open them. Now watch. As my finger bends, your finger will bend, and you'll find that your eyes are closing. And now you can bend your finger, but you can't open your eyes. You find yourself going into a very deep state, and the eyes just will not open, and you're going deeper and deeper and deeper all the time. Going so relaxed. Every muscle in your body is relaxing, and you're finding yourself going into a deeper state all the time. You just feel so good now. Now you see, this is what I mean by using the waking state of hypnosis to induce the trance state of hypnosis. And now when I have you open your eyes, you're going to feel better than you have all day, all week, all month. Now just watch this. I'll snap my fingers and you'll be wide awake. There you are. Now you can open your eyes. How do you feel? Pretty good. Okay. All right. That's just a little something that you should know. Oftentimes when we're working with high anxiety, I think Mrs. Dupay has found the need of that technique already, haven't you, Mrs. Dupay? I think you saw that in another class, isn't that right? But oftentimes, when we're working with a person who's of a high anxiety type, as is seen in psychiatric practice, such as Mrs. Dupay sees constantly, we must have a device which will take that high anxiety person, that high anxiety neurotic, you might say, immediately into the deep trance state and bypass any such things as going through a conditioning process. So I just showed you that technique to let you know that oft times, when I'm called into a psychiatrist's office to help him, he's got such an anxious, tense patient that if I was saying, now sit down, relax, and they just don't know how to relax. But if you start with the technique which I just showed you, you'll find that you gain the trance state quite quickly. Now, let's just go on with some more things about hypnoanalysis that you should know. You all read that approach to the patient, and you know that your approach to the patient must at all times be kindly. Remember, many of these people, some of their complaints may seem absolutely absurd to you, but they aren't absolutely absurd to the patient. And never forget, we'd only been teaching about 6 weeks. And I saw a case the like of which I had never seen before in my life, and the like of which I have never seen again. We got to this sixth session, and I was showing them some things with hypnoanalysis, and one of the doctors said, could he bring his 9 o'clock patient to my office? And I said, what do you mean by your 9 o'clock patient? What sort of a thing is that? 9 o'clock patient, what does that mean? He says, this is the strangest case I've ever heard of in my practice of medicine, Dave. He says, at 9 o'clock at night, exactly at 9 o'clock, no matter where that man is, his stomach muscles distend until he has what looks to be a tire going right around his stomach and sort of tapering out here. The muscles just seem to go into a cramp, and you just see like a tire wheel around his stomach. I thought the man was kidding, because there is no such illness that I've ever heard about, and generally, if you study the human mind pretty closely over many years, as I have done, you find out that that doesn't make a syndrome. I don't know of anything that I've ever heard of that is like this. So I asked the doctor to bring the man to class. Well, in came his 9 o'clock patient. He was an artist. He drew pictures for one of the big syndicates. I don't know, the Hearst Syndicate or something. The class started at 8 o'clock at night. He was there, and he was simply feeling wonderful. Put him into the hypnotic trance like that at 8 o'clock. I had never seen the illness, and I didn't even know that this was the 9 o'clock patient, because the doctor didn't say to me, Dave, this is the man who has the 9 o'clock trouble. So I just put him into the state to demonstrate to the doctor some little thing or other, and then I completely forgot that I had worked with the man. Now comes 9 o'clock. The minute that clock began to go to 9 o'clock, this man began to go into contortions, and they took off his shirt and everything to show this thing growing. At 9 o'clock it occurred full-blown, just it came out like that, not like a stomach, but just like an automobile tire had been put around this man's waist. It wasn't there at 5 minutes to 9. Now, it always lasted about an hour and then went away. Do you know that I tried to put the man into the trance state to find out what caused it? The instant this thing occurred, he was in such dire agony that you could not even approach the man. He wouldn't let us get the state on him from that point on. Now, when I say wouldn't or couldn't, I don't know which. All I know is that the man that I had hypnotized at 8 o'clock that night, like that, the instant he knew we were doing it to take away his functional symptom, he didn't want that functional symptom removed, and we couldn't hypnotize him at all. I've never seen that man since, but I think it's the strangest oddity that I have ever seen in conducting classes, and odd that it should occur in the first class that I ever taught. We have seen some very odd things, though, in these sessions devoted to hypnoanalysis. You see people like last week, Wednesday afternoon, Dr. Stallings can tell you, Dr. Amos brought to class a young girl. He knew that she was an anxiety neurotic, and he knew that she had problems. Her doctor had no idea that she was that serious a patient, that this was a suicidal depressive. He had no idea at all that she was that. Now, these are the amazing things that are revealed in hypnoanalysis. You find out how a person thinks and why they think that way. And once you've found out why they think that way, it's so easy to change their mind. An aftermath to that little girl's session in hypnoanalysis was very sweet when we heard today that we had entirely removed the will to die from the girl and changed it to the will to live, and gave her a feeling that life was worth living and that she could succeed in her chosen pursuit, which is commercial art. And what should happen but that very night she got a call from some store here in town that asked her to come to work for them, apparently as a commercial artist, a job which she never thought she'd be able to get. It wasn't that the way it was explained to us today, Dr. Stallings? No. So, you see, sometimes these hypnoanalyses have odd aftermaths. This girl will probably be a well-adjusted, normal individual, as well as she could be with one session of hypnoanalysis. I'm not trying to infer that she doesn't need further hypnotherapy. But remember, hypnoanalysis did the job that fast, where psychoanalysis would have taken 6 months, a year, 2 years, or 3 years to get as far as we got with her with, I don't know, maybe 45 minutes to an hour of work. Now, why is it that you always see me, when possible, use the pinpoint method? Again and again and again, people over America have said that I am the originator of the pinpoint method, and it seems to me that's so utterly silly. You'll hear doctors in a discussion, as I have heard them, saying, why, that's Dave Ellman's invention, that pinpoint method. Oh, it couldn't be. It couldn't be. It must have been done 100 years ago, 500 years ago. There's nothing new about the pinpoint method. It's just the fact that everybody knows there has to be a beginning to everything. There has to be a first time you're sick. There has to be a first time you have a headache. There has to be a first time that with Mary Ann, her stomach felt like it was jumping up and down and causing her all these aches and pains. There must be a first time that the suicidal depressive wanted to die. And the pinpoint method merely enables you to go back to the starting point of a neurosis. Therefore, it is a very commonly used device that I have trained thousands of men to do. And I say, whenever you're stuck as to how to proceed, just know that the condition you're looking at once had a beginning. It had to begin somewhere. Now, where did it begin? Find out where it began. Incidentally, one of our people came up to me here just before class began and talked about a dust allergy. And I asked her, did she always have the dust allergy? And she says, no. Now, we know that in her case, that dust allergy must have had a beginning. It must have begun somewhere. Now, was it dust or emotion, or a combination of dust and emotion, which caused that first allergic reaction? Because we have found again and again and again in the study of these things in hypnoanalysis that usually an allergy works out this way. You don't even know you have an allergy until something emotional comes along and suddenly dust becomes a vile poison. Up to that time you've been able to stomach dust all right. But now you can't stomach dust. Or we'll say that you've been able to eat chocolates or nuts or fish or whatever it is. You never knew you were allergic to them. Suddenly you become allergic. No, not suddenly you become allergic. It isn't that way at all in my estimation, and I may be differing with a lot of the medical men who are here. But I have to differ with some of you sometimes because I know that every allergist I've ever had in my classes, and I've had many of them, agree with what I'm telling you now. These allergies come along apparently at a time of emotional stress. For example, one of the fine allergists of America, and he is one of the fine allergists of America, the doctors and I had gone out to eat together. And the doctor and I are sitting there talking, and he'd seen me do some hypnoanalysis with allergies and so on, tracing down an allergy and so on. He says, you know, Dave, I can agree with you on a lot of things that you say about allergies. But he says, it's very odd the way I became an allergist. Now remember, here's one of the outstanding allergists of America talking. And I said, yeah, what made you decide to become an allergist, doctor? He says, well, I'll tell you. I was in medical school. I was engaged to be married. But along came an allergy that almost killed me.